I made a video a few months ago about the original Xbox One, the base model from 2013, a system that's relatively available for like $150 and can play many recently released games, including a lot of say the free-to-play games that I think kids in particular are interested in playing. I know that for $150 more, that $150 original Xbox One, you could simply get yourself a Series S, and if you have the money to do so, that's great, but it's double the price, and for a younger kid, the base Xbox One is really appealing. But not just for kids, for me as well, and I think many other gamers share a sentiment that having these 4K high-end graphics isn't really something that we're particularly looking for, and that's a lot of the comments that I got on that video about the base model Xbox One. People said this is 720p. Why would you want something like this? And as somebody that bought the Series S myself, because I don't even own a 4K TV, these high-end graphics are not something that's particularly appealing to me, and it's not something that I think impacts the overall gameplay in a huge aspect. I just want to simply play a fun game. A couple weeks ago, I talked about Need for Speed Payback, and during kind of my critique of the game and sharing my opinions on it, I never talked about the game's graphics. The game is something like 5 years old now, and the graphics are merely okay. And okay is good enough for me to have a good time with the game. Around the same time that I posted that Xbox One video, I was getting into playing Multiverse, the Warner Brothers Smash Bros. Ripoff on the Xbox. That game doesn't have particularly great graphics either, and I guess no, party brawler like that is going to have amazing graphics, but these are similar models to what I'd see on like a PlayStation 2 game. I know that's kind of the art style that they're going for, but I mean, really, jokes aside, these models could have been on the PlayStation 2 or PlayStation 3, but that's not impacting my overall gameplay experience here. And in a lot of ways, this obsession with higher end graphics has ultimately made development times for games be longer, more expensive, and as a result, arguably we've received less new major titles than we did on like the PlayStation 2 or PlayStation 3 era, in part because of the graphical standards and the increased budget that this requires. Meanwhile, I guess Nintendo is putting this out themselves when they release these games like Pokemon that don't look graphically great, but, have a resemblance of fun. Now, there's other quality of life features and things like that that could be improved in Pokemon, just open up the experience, broaden the experience, and make the experience be better, but they're not making graphics be at the forefront, so you'd think that Game Freak would be able to do that, and they have innovated in some ways in their most recent title that came out earlier this year. But I feel like my personal de-emphasis on graphics this kind of came with the fact that I think we've reached a point of diminishing returns when it comes to graphics in video game consoles. Take a look at the PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 2. Huge jump in terms of what you were getting graphically. PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3, we went to HD for the first time. Big jump there as well. And the PlayStation 3 continued to improve over the course of its lifespan, where the games by 2011 and 2012 were looking really good. And then that transitioned into the PlayStation 4, where those end of PS3 games to PlayStation 4 games, it wasn't a huge trade-off. I mean, there were improvements, but it was much more marginalized than what we saw going from the PlayStation 2 to the PlayStation 3. There wasn't as big of a jump, and that jump got even more diminished when you went from the PlayStation 4 to the PlayStation 5, where some people that have bought the PlayStation 5 argue that, maybe they rushed in to buy it too soon because of the hype, because there just aren't simply a ton of games that are taking advantage of the full wealth of capability that the system has. And of course, you have to have the right equipment to go along with that, and the games have to have time to bake in the oven to come out to be the complete experience that people want them to be, and that requires a lot of time and budget to create these very detailed experiences as games have become increasingly more detailed. And companies like Rockstar have looked at that increased cost and overall commitment to creating a new game, and have seemingly really taken their time with making a new Grand Theft Auto, or at the very least kind of just said we're okay with what we got, and continued to port GTA 5 forward on what seemed like relatively similar systems, going from the PlayStation 4 to the PlayStation 5, and maybe even the PlayStation 3 before it, as they continue to move a near 10-year-old game forward onto the future, rather than releasing a new Grand Theft Auto title. But may I remind you of the Grand Theft Auto remakes that came out last year and how much of a buggy mess those were. Anytime you release a new product, you open yourself up to the potential of it being a buggy mess and ultimately earning some bad press. And that's what happened with Cyberpunk 2077. Could you have expanded the Witcher universe? Could you have created, a few more expansions for that rather than creating an entirely new game? Well, CD Projekt Red seems like far too ambitious of a studio to simply settle for that, but ultimately that may have been a smoother experience rather than creating this whole new game, whole new world from scratch and ultimately having it be a rushed, buggy mess that turned into the giant disappointment that Cyberpunk 2077 was at launch, and continues to still be something that slowly has improved to getting closer to what was promised to us, though I don't think they'll ever quite reach that pinnacle. So while people may rag on the base Xbox One, its inability to play these higher-end graphic games and play things in 4K or in some cases even 1080p, I'll be over here playing Splitgate, an online first-person shooter that I've enjoyed, talked about a little bit on this channel before, and quite honestly, looks like it could have released on the PlayStation 3 because it's just not graphically that much of a looker of a game, and that's okay because at the end of the day, it's a game that I have a fun time with, and the gameplay should be prioritized over the actual graphics, so this doesn't seem to happen very often, which I think is why we see so many CGI trailers prior to launch instead of actual gameplay trailers, because people want to show you as good of a look at the game as you can get, even if that's not what it'll actually look like once you get into it, and even if that sets aside the gameplay that you're actually coming to the game to experience. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Bailey, and I will see you in the next video.